When we counted down the 10 greatest jazz records ever made, we knew one thing immediately. 10 was never going to be enough. Some artists are simply too influential, too groundbreaking, and too essential to leave out of the conversation. So we're back with 12 more extraordinary records. From the self-taught pioneer who reinvented the jazz solo, to the troubled genius whose time in a state hospital inspired a timeless standard, and the factory welder whose accidental discovery changed jazz guitar forever.
I'm a fool to want you.
If you missed our first countdown, be sure to watch it before diving into this one. This list continues the journey with 12 more unforgettable stories of brilliance, struggle, and innovation. This is Sax Appeal. Let's count them down.
Time and time again.
Number 12, Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald sings the Cole Porter Songbook, 1956.
When I'm out on a quiet spree.
Ella Fitzgerald's early life gave no hint of the first lady of song she'd become. After her mother died when Ella was 15, she bounced between relatives and a state reform school, and by some accounts was homeless by her teens. In 1934, she stepped on stage at the Apollo Theater's amateur night, apparently intending to dance, but sang instead when nerves got the better of her. Bandleader Chick Webb heard her, and unimpressed at first by her appearance and lack of training, was eventually won over enough to become her legal guardian. For 2 decades she scored hits, but her label kept her boxed in as a novelty singer of scat tunes and gimmicks. She wanted to prove she could interpret the American songbook with the same depth as any jazz instrumentalist. Her manager, Norman Granz, built an entire label, Verve Records, partly around giving her the chance. The first release on that new label was a double album built around a single songwriter, Cole Porter. It was an unusual, expensive gamble. Extensive liner notes and a 2-record format were nearly unheard of for a jazz vocalist at the time. The gamble paid off completely. The Cole Porter Songbook launched a series that would eventually cover Gershwin, Ellington, and Rodgers and Hart, cementing Fitzgerald as jazz's most versatile interpreter and finally letting the world hear the singer she'd always known she could be. Number 11, Herbie Hancock, Maiden Voyage, 1965. Herbie Hancock's path into jazz started about as far from smoky nightclubs as you can get. Born in Chicago, he was a certified classical prodigy, performing the first movement of a Mozart piano concerto with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra at just 11 years old. He had almost no formal jazz training. He simply started picking apart harmonies by ear, teaching himself the language other musicians spent years in conservatories chasing. By his early 20s, he was already turning heads in Chicago and New York, and in 1963, Miles Davis, never an easy man to impress, invited him to join his new quintet. Hancock became a key architect of what critics now call Davis's second great quintet, a band built on musicians barely out of their teens, rewriting the rules of rhythm and harmony in real time. In between Davis sessions, Hancock kept building his own catalog for Blue Note Records. In 1965, at just 24 years old, he assembled a band featuring Freddie Hubbard, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter, and a 19-year-old Tony Williams to record an album whose title track alone would become a jazz standard covered for decades to come. Maiden Voyage remains one of the most influential jazz records of the 1960s, proof that a former child prodigy who taught himself jazz by ear could go on to help define what modern jazz composition sounds like. Up next, a blind virtuoso who reportedly made Vladimir Horowitz feel like an amateur. Number 10. Art Tatum. The Art Tatum Solo Masterpieces, 1953 to 1955. Art Tatum was born with cataracts that left him blind in one eye and with barely any vision in the other. An assault in his 20s later cost him what little sight remained. He taught himself piano largely by ear, memorizing player piano rolls his mother played at home, reportedly by the age of 3. What he built from that foundation became the stuff of legend among musicians who should have known better than to be intimidated. Fats Waller is said to have stopped mid-performance to announce, "God is in the house," when Tatum walked into a club. Classical titans Vladimir Horowitz and Sergei Rachmaninoff both reportedly called him the greatest pianist they'd ever heard, in any style. A young Oscar Peterson later admitted that hearing Tatum's recordings for the first time nearly made him give up the instrument entirely. Tatum's technique defied easy explanation. Independent hands playing entirely different rhythmic ideas simultaneously. Harmonic substitutions inserted mid-phrase that wouldn't become standard jazz vocabulary for another decade. He rarely performed with a full band, preferring the freedom of solo piano or a stripped-down trio, and he was famous for playing marathon sessions alone at the keyboard, long after his official gigs had ended. In August 1956, just months before his death, Tatum played a solo concert at the Hollywood Bowl to nearly 20,000 people, the largest audience of his career, and a fitting send-off for a musician other pianists still measure themselves against. Number 9. Oscar Peterson, Night Train, 1962. Oscar Peterson started out on trumpet, not piano. At age 7, a bout of tuberculosis ended that. His brother Fred wasn't as fortunate, dying from the same illness at 16. And Peterson's father redirected all of his son's musical energy toward the keyboard instead. His father was a strict disciplinarian who expected nothing short of excellence, and Peterson practiced from morning to night, with breaks only for meals. As a teenager, Peterson heard a recording by Art Tatum for the first time and reportedly became so intimidated by what he heard that he didn't touch the piano again for weeks. Rather than staying discouraged, he used it as fuel, pushing his technique to match the speed and harmonic complexity that had shaken him. By 1962, Peterson had built one of the most celebrated trios in jazz, and in December of that year, he recorded Night Train in a marathon run of studio sessions in Los Angeles under producer Norman Granz. The album, blending blues, R&B, and jazz standards, became one of the definitive trio records of the era and included Hymn to Freedom, an original composition Peterson wrote that would later be adopted as an anthem during the civil rights movement. From a child who lost his brother and his first instrument to tuberculosis, to a pianist once frightened into silence by his own idol, Peterson built himself into one of the most technically dazzling and enduring figures jazz has ever produced. Next, a self-taught guitarist who spent his days working a factory shift before a chance encounter changed everything. Number 8. Wes Montgomery, Smokin' at the Half Note, 1965. Wes Montgomery didn't pick up a guitar until he was 19, after hearing a Charlie Christian record that stopped him in his tracks. He was almost entirely self-taught, unable to read music his whole career, and he developed his signature techniques by accident rather than design. To avoid disturbing his neighbors while practicing late at night, he started plucking the strings with the pad of his thumb instead of a pick. A softer, warmer touch that became his lifelong trademark, along with his uncanny ability to solo in parallel octaves. After a stint touring with Lionel Hampton's band, family responsibilities pulled Montgomery back home to Indianapolis, where he supported his wife and 7 children by working a factory shift from early morning to early afternoon, then playing local clubs from 9 at night until 2 in the morning. It was a grueling schedule that reportedly left him occasionally blacking out from exhaustion. One night in the late 1950s, saxophonist Cannonball Adderley happened to be in the audience at an Indianapolis club and was floored by what he heard. The next morning, Adderley called producer Orrin Keepnews and insisted he sign Montgomery to Riverside Records immediately. By 1965, Montgomery had become one of the most influential guitarists in jazz, and Smokin' at the Half Note, recorded live with the same rhythm section that had backed Miles Davis, captured him at his absolute peak, just 3 years before his sudden death from a heart attack at 43. Musicians from Pat Metheny to George Benson still cite this record as the one that changed how they thought about the instrument. Coming up, the saxophonist whose album almost didn't happen because the singer wasn't even supposed to be in the room. If you're enjoying discovering the stories behind these records as much as we love telling them, hit subscribe. We're covering the full history of jazz, one legend at a time, and there's a lot more still to come. Now, back to the countdown. Number 7. Stan Getz, Getz Gilberto, 1964.
Tall and tan and young and lovely, the girl from East.
By the early 1960s, Stan Getz had already built a reputation as one of the smoothest tenor saxophonists in jazz, and he'd become fascinated with Brazilian bossa nova, a genre still largely unknown to American audiences. He traveled to New York to record with João Gilberto, the guitarist and singer widely considered the father of the style, along with composer Antonio Carlos Jobim. During the sessions, Gilberto's 22-year-old wife, Astrud, was simply in the studio as a guest. She had never sung professionally in her life. New English lyrics had been written for one of the album's songs, and because Astrud's English was the strongest in the room, she was asked, almost as an afterthought, to sing a verse. Some accounts say the idea came from producer Creed Taylor. Others credit Gilberto himself. Astrud herself said her husband simply turned to her mid-rehearsal and asked her to join in. That unplanned vocal became "The Girl from Ipanema."
How can he tell?
When it was released as a single in 1964, it became one of the biggest crossover hits jazz has ever produced, launching an unknown first-time singer into global stardom and single-handedly introducing bossa nova to mainstream America. Getz Gilberto went on to win the Grammy for Album of the Year, becoming one of only 2 jazz records to ever claim that award. It's a reminder that some of the most iconic moments in jazz history happened almost by accident, to people who weren't even supposed to be part of the plan. Next up, the trumpet prodigy so disciplined and clean living that he became a role model to musicians twice his fame, before fate cut his story short.
Girl from Ipanema goes walking.
Number 6. Clifford Brown, Study in Brown, 1955. In an era when heroin addiction quietly devastated an entire generation of jazz musicians, Clifford Brown stood out for the opposite reason. He didn't drink, didn't smoke, and never touched drugs. Musicians who worked with him consistently said the same thing, that they'd never heard anyone say a bad word about him. Sonny Rollins, freshly out of a rehabilitation program for his own addiction, later called meeting Brown a turning point, saying watching him play brilliant music while living completely clean gave him a model to follow. Brown's talent had already survived one brush with disaster. In 1950, a serious car accident left him unable to play trumpet for nearly 2 years. He spent the recovery teaching himself piano instead, then rebuilt his embouchure from scratch once he could return to the horn. By 1954, he joined forces with drummer Max Roach to form one of the most celebrated quintets in hard bop. Study in Brown, recorded in 1955, showcased Brown's originals alongside pianist Richie Powell, younger brother of bebop legend Bud Powell. Tracks like Sandu and Cherokee displayed a trumpet tone so clean and articulate that even his idol, Louis Armstrong, reportedly kept a well-worn copy of the record and made personal notes on Brown's playing. On June 26, 1956, driving overnight to the band's next gig in Chicago, the car carrying Brown, Richie Powell, and Powell's wife went off the road in the rain. All 3 were killed. Brown was 25, and jazz lost one of its most disciplined, beloved talents at the very moment his career was still accelerating. Coming up, the trio that recorded one of the greatest live jazz albums ever made, not knowing it would also be their last. Number 5. Bill Evans, Sunday at the Village Vanguard, 1961. By 1961, pianist Bill Evans had built a trio unlike anything jazz had heard before, one where the bassist and drummer weren't just keeping time, but improvising as equal voices alongside the piano. The bassist responsible for a large part of that shift was 25-year-old Scott LaFaro, whose melodic, almost lead instrument approach to the bass was reshaping what the instrument could do in a jazz combo. Producer Orrin Keepnews had noticed growing tension within the group and worried the trio might not stay together much longer. Wanting to capture their chemistry before it was too late, he arranged to record their final night of a 2-week engagement at New York's Village Vanguard, taping all 5 sets the band played that Sunday, June 25th. None of them could have known how urgent that decision truly was. Just 10 days after the recording, Scott LaFaro was killed in a car accident. He was 25 years old. What was meant to be a document of a working band's live sound became, instead, a final testament, one of the most celebrated live jazz recordings ever made, and the last time this specific trio would ever play together. Evans was reportedly so devastated by LaFaro's death that he stopped playing publicly for months afterward, unsure he could ever recreate what the 3 of them had built. Next, the singer whose voice was falling apart in real time, and who turned that collapse into one of the most emotionally naked recordings jazz has ever produced. Number 4. Chet Baker. Chet Baker Sings, 1954. Chet Baker's early career reads almost like a fairy tale. In 1954 alone, the trumpeter and singer beat out Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie in major jazz polls, despite having no formal music education and playing almost entirely by ear. Chet Baker Sings, released that same year, became his signature statement. His aching, unpolished rendition of My Funny Valentine turned into the song most associated with him for the rest of his life. For a moment, Baker seemed to have it all: critical acclaim, commercial success, and a level of mainstream crossover appeal almost no other jazz musician of the era could match. Then heroin addiction, which had already been building in the background, began pulling everything apart. Over the following decades, Baker cycled through arrests, prison time in Italy, and deportations from West Germany and England on drug charges. In 1966, while attempting to buy drugs, he was severely beaten, and his teeth were badly broken in the assault. For a trumpet player, that injury was close to catastrophic. It took him nearly 7 years of relearning his embouchure from scratch before he could play at a professional level again. Baker eventually did return to performing, but he never fully escaped addiction's grip, and he died in 1988 after a fall from a hotel window in Amsterdam. Chet Baker Sings remains a snapshot of a talent at its most promising, before the years that followed complicated that promise beyond repair. Coming up, a singer whose final great record was made from a voice that had nearly nothing left to give, and somehow said more than ever before. Number 3. Billie Holiday, Lady in Satin, 1958. By 1958, Billie Holiday had lived through more than most performers experience in a lifetime. a childhood marked by poverty and abuse, a drug bust that cost her the New York City cabaret card, required to perform in clubs that served alcohol, and years of heroin and alcohol addiction that had permanently damaged both her health and her voice. She was in her early 40s, but sounded, by her own arranger's account, decades older, her once supple tone reduced to something rough, strained, and often uncertain in pitch. Arranger Ray Ellis had struggled just to reach her before the sessions began, and when Holiday finally arrived at the studio, he was reportedly startled by how frail she'd become.
I can't get enough.
Still, over 3 days in February 1958, she recorded a full album of standards with a lush 40-piece orchestra behind her, pushing through takes despite a voice that no longer cooperated the way it once had. The result confounded critics on release. Many focused only on the vocal decline and dismissed the record outright, but listeners who stayed with the album heard something else entirely. An artist stripping away every ounce of technical polish and delivering pure, unguarded emotional truth in its place. Ellis later recalled seeing tears in Holiday's eyes during the playback of one particularly raw ballad. Lady in Satin was the last album released in Holiday's lifetime. She died the following year at 44. It remains one of the most emotionally devastating vocal performances ever committed to record, proof that a voice in ruins can still carry more truth than one in perfect condition. Next, the man whose trumpet solo on a single 1928 recording is often credited with inventing modern jazz as we know it.
I know it's wrong.
Number 2. Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong and his Hot Five, 1928. Before there was a jazz soloist, as we understand the concept today, there was a trumpet cadenza that lasted about 15 seconds. On June 28, 1928, 26-year-old Louis Armstrong walked into a Chicago studio with a reconstituted lineup of his Hot Five to record West End Blues, a tune written by his own mentor, King Oliver, who had recorded it himself just weeks earlier. What Armstrong did with the song bore almost no resemblance to Oliver's version, or to anything jazz musicians had put on record before. He opened with an unaccompanied trumpet introduction of blazing virtuosity, exploring the full range of the instrument with a confidence and improvisational freedom nobody had captured on a recording at that scale. It transformed the song from a collective ensemble piece into an individual showcase, a shift that reshaped the entire direction of jazz. Armstrong, by most accounts, was fairly nonchalant about what he'd just accomplished. For him, it was simply another recording date. Everyone else in the room, and everyone who has studied the track in the decades since, understood it differently. NPR would later name West End Blues one of the 100 most influential musical works of the 20th century. It's difficult to overstate what Armstrong did in those 3 minutes. He took the collective, ensemble-driven sound of early New Orleans jazz and single-handedly turned it into a music built around the individual genius of the soloist. The exact foundation every artist on both of these countdowns has been building on ever since. And now, at number 1, the most revolutionary saxophonist jazz has ever produced. whose breakdown in a mental hospital came right before he changed the entire language of the music. Number 1. Charlie Parker, The Complete Savoy and Dial Studio Recordings, 1945 to 1948. Charlie Parker had been battling heroin addiction since his teenage years, and by the mid-1940s, it was already shaping the trajectory of his career in dangerous ways. In November 1945, Parker walked into a New York studio to record a session that would help define an entirely new style of jazz. His regular pianist, Bud Powell, was unexpectedly unavailable, so trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie stepped in on piano instead. What they recorded that day, a blistering original called Coco, became one of the foundational documents of bebop. Just months later, on tour in Los Angeles, Parker's addiction caught up with him catastrophically. Struggling through withdrawal during a recording session for Lover Man, he could barely hold his instrument steady. Producers released the take anyway, and Parker reportedly hated the recording for the rest of his life because of what it revealed about his condition. That night, he suffered a full breakdown and was committed to Camarillo State Hospital, where he remained for roughly 6 months. When he emerged in early 1947, Parker returned to New York and to some of the most vital, forward-thinking playing of his career, eventually leading a quintet that included a young Miles Davis. He even wrote a tongue-in-cheek tribute to his hospitalization, a tune called Relaxin' at Camarillo. Charlie Parker didn't just play saxophone. He rebuilt jazz's entire vocabulary from a place of profound personal crisis, inventing a language so complex and so influential that virtually every saxophonist who came after him, including every artist featured across both of these countdowns, has had to reckon with what he did to the instrument. That's why, of all 12 names on this list, Bird closes it out at number 1.